Hello, I'm Richard with EV for You Custom Conversions, and welcome to the first episode of a new series. And I think we're going to call this one the Electric Volkswagen Transporter. People parked make the turnaround difficult here. Anyway,
approaching right turn, followed by a freeway entrance
I'm en route
County Road 99
to Southern California to pick up the vehicle, which is a fairly rare vehicle, at least in the United States, since they were never imported here. It's my understanding that 12 or 13 of them were imported to Canada, kind of on a fluke. And over the years, 3 or 4 of them have made their way into the United States.
Freeway entrance on the right, I-5 Sacramento.
And this is going to be one of those. It's a 1991 Volkswagen double cab pickup. And we'll talk more about that
Continue on the current road in
later on.
miles.
But first off, we got to go get it, which is a little bit of a road trip, being that it's about 650 miles south of where we're located. So I'm en route to go pick it up today, and it's going to be about a 12-hour journey with stops. I tend to get on the road and just fly. Don't stop till I run out of diesel. But my wife made me promise to stop every couple hours, get out and stretch. So I just had my first stop 2.5 hours after leaving, and in Woodland, California, heading to the Southern California desert. Spend the night tonight, then first thing in the morning, pick up the car, and then head back. It'll be about a 1,300 mile round trip. Could do that in 2 days. Well, there it is, folks. The first look. It's a beauty. Well, we're back in beautiful Shaft Lake, California. Got in about 1 o'clock last night. Well, here we are. Back at the shop with this 1991 Volkswagen double cab transporter. So we're going to pull it off the trailer. We'll do a walk around, let you get a little close-up of the vehicle. But it's been repainted once, to the best of my knowledge. Take a look at it and say it's been repainted once. Same color as original. We're very close to it. It's in pretty good shape overall. We're going to drive around gasoline powered to take a look, see what kind of mechanical issues it might have. The gentleman that owns it really hadn't driven it. He purchased it down in Southern California and really didn't trust it enough to drive it. So we're going to flush all that out before we convert it, which is something we always recommend. Make sure the car is in good condition prior to the conversion, and we're going to practice what we preach. Let's pull it off the trailer and we'll give you an overview. I don't know much about this at this point, but we're going to do some homework. I can see that it's fuel injected. And like I always recommend, you need to have manuals. This guy has provided us with a couple of them. Very nice. That's the view without the scooter in place. Pretty good sized cavity in there. Works perfect for what you wanted to use it for. I always liked these when I was a kid. The old 60s vintage VW pickups. Never owned one. So first off, we'll do a quick little walk around. This is a 1991 Volkswagen double cab transporter. And this one's in good condition. And you really can't tell that it's not gasoline powered, with the exception of perhaps you get far enough back here, we can see, let me drop down, you can see the cross member. That's the rear engine mount. We've retained that and we're using it as a rear mount for the motor. That was originally covered by the exhaust and a heat shield. There's the muffler. Long muffler. The other clue that this is no longer internal combustion, the little placard that says it's electric. But other than that, the stance and everything else looks just like it did originally. But there's one other clue that something's different. The owner didn't want us to have the charge port where the gas filler was, which is typically what we do. So those are your only clues that this is not a factory internal combustion transporter. Now in the front, after the radiator was removed and the heating system installed, we blocked off the radiator intake. So that's just all black now. That's a high impact ABS plastic in there. Gives it a nice clean and aerodynamic look. Had removed the grill to get the radiator out. So let's take a couple glances at some of the features that make these transporters kind of unique. A cool feature of the transporter is that the tailgate and the sides all go down. And they do so very quickly and easily. And and give you easy access to the bed, either from the sides or from the back. There's also a step. Volkswagen had that long before Ford ever thought of it. So it gives you a nice loading and unloading and work surface, whatever. Great feature, love it. Another cool feature of the Transporter is the cargo area underneath the bed, commonly referred to as the treasure chest. This model has a door on both sides. And that's where the 38 Calb 180 cells are located, as well as the charger, our safety interconnect, shunt, and fuses. The cells are on glides, and so they come out for, that's how we installed them, and for inspection they slide right on out. Very cool feature. Like I said, just a really neat vehicle. The engine compartment door is, that opening's rather small. Basically you can get in here to do a visual inspection, check fluids, that type of thing. In this scenario now that it's electric, we still have power steering fluid to check. We've got controller coolant level to check, and our service disconnect. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the hatch cover, which is in the bed here. We'll remove the hatch cover and give you a better view of the engine compartment, or motor compartment now. So 4 bolts allow us access to the top here through the hatch cover. And the 38 Calb 180s are providing power to our AC 75 motor from High Performance Electric Vehicle Systems. That's coming through the Curtis 1238-7601 650 amp inverter. In the corner over here we have our vacuum pump and reservoir, service disconnect, main contactor, wiring board, coolant reservoir. This is recycled from the original setup. It has good capacity, and so help keep costs down, so we reuse that. On the other side here we have our power steering pump being powered by an electric motor. Behind it is our pump for the cooling system. We take the coolant from the reservoir, goes through the pump, goes through the chill plate that the inverter is mounted to. From there it goes through a cooler that is underneath the motor. From there it goes through a radiator that's mounted above the transaxle which has fans on it, and from there back to our reservoir. Let's take a look at the cockpit area. Not a lot has been changed here. Looks, you know, not stock, but not outrageous. What we have up here in the dash is the rear window defroster, emergency flashers, and this is now for the heater. Switching that on turns on an element in a reservoir that heats coolant that then flows through the stock heater core and provides heat. Works very well. This is a dual element reservoir. So when we flip that switch, the light comes on as a reminder. It flips a contactor which provides power to one of the heating elements and turns on a pump for cycling that. And right here we have a switch next to the stock heating controls that allows us to switch from high to low. Switching it to high turns on the second contactor and element and heats this thing up rather quickly. Then we have the Curtis gauge that gives us volts, amps, RPMs, motor temperature, controller temperature. 12-volt gauge next to that, just to monitor our auxiliary battery and DC to DC converter. And the JLD 404, which monitors our pack volts, amps, and amp hours. Another feature to mention is the power steering. You have the ability to shut it on and off manually. So when this switch is on, anytime you turn on the ignition, power steering is on, the motor's on that runs the pump. I don't use it. This thing steers very easily without it. But if you get in a tight parking spot or something, flip it on, you instantly have power steering, and then it steers extremely easily. And so doesn't use a lot of juice. It pulls, when you're going straight, about 0.9 amps, and when turning about 3, at lock about 5 amps. So not a major consideration on your range in regards to power steering. So there you have a quick overview of the conversion of this 1991 Volkswagen double cab transporter. This video we're going to talk about the range test that we did, and so we'll talk about things such as the motor temperature, controller temperature, watt hours per mile, amp hours per mile, so forth, and let you know what this conversion that we've been following, what the bottom line is, what can it do now that it's all complete and on the road. What can the owner expect? So join us in the classroom, and we'll discuss all of that. We have 144 amp hours that's usable, and you take the usable amp hours divided by the amp hours per mile, that gives us a 60-mile range. There's a backstory on this one. We converted this to electric back in 2013, and it was originally intended to transport a mobility scooter in the rear, and so that the rear seat had been removed and this flat floor had been put in to allow for loading in transporting this mobility scooter? Well, what I was told was that it never was used for its intended purpose. And ended up sitting in the California desert for 8 years. So what you're seeing today is this vehicle, after having sat outside in the desert, Southern California desert, for 8 years. And maybe even longer. I don't know how long it's been sitting out before it was converted. But I know what it looked like 8 years ago after we converted it, and we actually delivered this one for the customer. There's a lot of special circumstances involved in this project, and so we did a lot of work and things that we don't normally do on a vehicle. And if you're interested in all of that and more of the backstory, we did a complete series featuring this vehicle back in 2013. But as you see it today is just how we picked it up a few weeks ago. I was notified that the vehicle needed to be moved and was asked to relocate the vehicle. We ended up going down to the desert, picking this vehicle up, and bringing it to our warehouse here for storage. And so it's sitting here till we have the opportunity to do a little work on it. So I'm going to give you a little more of a close-up view in this video so you can see just what it looks like after having sat for 8 years. It was used a little bit, but not very much. It mostly just sat. And we had a hard time rolling this thing because the tires had sat in one spot so long that did not want to move. And you know, you can see how faded the mirrors are. Instead of being black, they're gray. Some of the weather stripping is starting to dry out, so forth. But amazingly, it's in pretty good shape. It was under a shade tree, and the interior still looks good. I think it looks very good, all things considered. One of the things that we did as part of the extras in this project was we had a spray-in bed liner put on it. The customer requested that we do that because, like I said, because of his circumstances. So we did that for him, found somebody that would do that. And because it was going to be in the desert, he didn't want black, he wanted a light color. So it turned out we found somebody. Nobody wanted to do anything other than black. And we're in a small rural area, but we found somebody who would do this light gray. And so we had that done. And so you're going to see what happens after 8 years. For that, you can see the quality of job that they did. It's obvious that they did not prep things very well and so forth. The old test of time here. So basically, delivered this 8 years ago, and you'll see if you revisit that series, this was a pretty clean ride. It was very nice, in my opinion. I always thought it would make a great shop truck. And then we fast forward 8 years, and you see what just sitting in an environment like the desert will do. Luckily, it was dry, so we basically haven't had a lot of rust issues, but there have been some issues, and we'll take a look at a few of those. So we did a walk around the outside. Let's take a look at the inside. We did look at the back, the back seat area. So let's take a look at the front. This is just as received. So we haven't cleaned this thing or anything. What we did do was there were a lot of leaves in the bed, and I raked those out, and then we just hosed the vehicle off because it was pretty dirty. But this is the inside, basically untouched. And so, another train. And so it doesn't look too bad. I was really impressed. There's the operator's manual we provided, still with the vehicle here. I mean, this is for 1991, and for having sat, it's I think it's in amazing condition. But let's take a look at the bed I mentioned. You know, we saw that the this wooden cover is just rotted and gone, so that will have to be replaced. And you can see, you know, the dirt and staining from where leaves were sitting in this thing, and so that wasn't good. But there's lots of places like this where this is just bubbling up, coming loose, and that's just obviously, you know, because the surface wasn't properly prepared before this was applied. It's a weather-tight storage compartment that's locked. And not as dirty and dusty in here. Things look pretty clean. Wow. Our straps are still as tight as can be. Wow. It's like a piano wire. Sweet. Everything appears to be working, with the exception we not having the motor spin up. Hey, this thing's been out in the desert for 8 years. What's the status of these batteries? And I didn't know what the status of the car was going to be. I mean, it was a 12-hour drive for me to go down and get it. I had 5 days to make a decision whether or not to go get it. That's how much notice I had before the thing was towed away and impounded. And so, you know, I wasn't sure I wanted to make that investment in time and energy to drive down to the desert from Northern California to get something that had been sitting in the open, you know, outdoors for 8 years. Fortunately, my son was within an hour of that location, so I had him run by and do some reconnaissance, and he said, "Hey, Dad, it looks pretty good for having sat 8 years in the desert." He says, "I think it's worth your time." So we got it. I measured the batteries. I was encouraged. The motor wasn't working at the time, so I couldn't drive it. We had to use a lot of sweat and muscle to get the thing to the trailer. Once we got it in line with the trailer, I let electricity through a winch to bring it into the trailer, and then we transported it here. The batteries were that kind of unknown. Here's the interesting part. These are 180 amp hour cells, and 80% of that is usable. And the whole, 100% is not usable, only 80%. And so 80% of 180 amp hours is 144 amp hours, okay? And guess how much we were able to use when it shut off? Exactly 144. I was pleased that after all that those cells have been through, that they still have their rated capacity.